Dr. Godwin, so how would you define a people pleaser?
Oh, great question, Shaq.
Yeah.
I know there's lots of different ways people have defined this. And for me, a people pleaser is somebody who is a chronic yeser. A people
Mm,
pleaser is someone who's really been conditioned to believe that harmony and politeness and even self-sacrifice are personality traits, when really they're just survival strategies that are often dressed up with a nice smile. I say, right?
yeah.
Basically, it's someone who really, we think that our value comes from being agreeable and accommodating. And the spoiler alert is that that's not true.
Yeah. Now, where do those beliefs come from?
Yeah, great question. From my own experience and looking at the research and just talking with people around the world,
Mm,
it is so much so. I think it really is a lot of nurture. We talk about nurture versus nature. I
yeah.
mean, yes, fine. Maybe some people are a little more opportune to be this, but I didn't pop out of the womb worried that I was going to disappoint somebody, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
I came out that way. I learned it, right? From an early age, especially as a woman, as girls, we
Yeah.
give them feedback and cues that they need to be good and polite and don't make waves and help make everybody comfortable and sort of put other people's needs before their own. And so basically, as a people pleaser, it's like I got my gold stars by sort of putting myself second, putting everybody else first. And those messages really stick. And so it's a lot of social conditioning, and but that nurture that we get sort of does have an impact on our nature, right? We start to then get hardwired, literally like at a neurological level, that I get a dopamine hit when I make somebody else
Uh-huh.
happy, right? So it's like I start having neural pathways that I are reinforced, that I seek over and over again, of like, oh, that's a good thing. I'm going to get a positive reinforcement when I, make somebody else happy, even if that doesn't make me happy. And so it sort of gets reinforced.
Got it. Yeah. So it's pretty much you get recognized for being polite and kind, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's pretty interesting. Now, who tends to like reinforce that belief more? Is it like from the parents, or is it just like society in general? Because obviously, it's your environment, right? Not necessarily how you're born,
Right.
right? So like, yeah, is it more of your parents or like the like society around you?
That's a great question, Zach.
Hmm.
And really, if again look across the research, look across experience, it does start with our parents, even unintentionally, right? It's not
Hmm.
necessarily that our parents are intentionally, trying to mold us into these people pleasers, although maybe they want us to please them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it does start sort of in our first sort of, organizational structure that we're a part of is our family. And so we do start getting those messages, and research shows that even, parents again even do give different messages, even unintentionally, to like their boys versus their girls, and the girls are increasingly rewarded for being polite, being kind, being nice, being helpful, different so than boys. And you're exactly right, though, it continues on. So like in wider society, so then we go off to school and we get these messages, in the classroom and from our friends, that like, in order to be liked, or in order to be worthy
Hmm.
of our friends' attention, we need to be polite and nice and helpful. And so it just gets reinforced all the way up, till we're adults in the workplace and everywhere
Yes.
else. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty much like, how you're wired as a kid, it pretty much like really dictates how you operate in life, right? And yeah, like we'll talk about the problems and how it can really affect people in like various
Yeah.
parts of their life. But like if someone's watching this and then they want to know, okay, like what's the difference between being kind and polite versus, being a people pleaser, what would you say is like the main difference? Like, yeah, like in those two.
No, great question. And yeah, I would say a main difference is, if I'm being a people pleaser, I'm not necessarily being authentic to what my own needs and wants are. So I will even like suppress or sort of ignore what I really want or think, or not say something or not do something in order to make you, to put your needs and everything above my own. And so versus being kind, I can, we can disagree in a kind way. I can tell you I don't want to do something in a kind way,
Yeah.
right? Versus that, it's really sort of the privileging of other people above ourselves. And so that's really a big difference between sort of, being kind is taking others into consideration, and also yourself, being kind to yourself. If I'm a people pleaser, my focus is entirely on the other.
Hmm.
It's sort of an external, I'm looking for external validation. I'm putting, it's external, versus kindness really is more of an internal thing. And again, I can disagree with you in a kind way. I can tell you I don't want to do something in a kind way. But if I'm
Yes.
a people pleaser, I'm going to say yes, even if I don't want to do it. I'm going
Yeah.
to, all of those things. Yeah.
God, yeah. So it's pretty much just saying, yes when you don't want to, right? And then, not knowing how to say no. And then you believe if you say no that you're not being kind, you're not being polite. But
Right.
in reality, like you want to be kind and polite because like you want to be kind and polite,
Yeah.
not because you want someone else's
Right,
validation. Yeah.
exactly. I love the work like Brene Brown talks about,
Oh,
being
yeah.
clear is being kind, right?
Hmm.
So being clear and like, this is what I want or what I don't want and why, is a kindness we can do to others, is a kindness we can do to ourselves. And so exactly, Shaq, that is a big difference between sort of the kindness versus the people pleasing of the other.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that is a pretty good, like just like an overview on people pleasing and like where it comes from. Now, the main problem really starts when it gets in the way of your life,
Yeah,
right? And it can pretty much really ruin, almost every part of your life if you're not careful with how far you let it go, right?
right.
So let's just start with one of the main things here. It's like romantic, and like platonic relationships, right? So how does it ruin your ability to build meaningful friendships and like relationships in that domain?
Oh, another great question. You're so right, and it has an impact in that domain in so many ways. First and foremost, it's because if you're always adapting and trying to like make the other person happy, whether that's romantic or friends, nobody actually really knows the real you, right? You've sort of become this chameleon in a way, always sort of adapting and trying to like make them happy, that in ways then you're attracting people, even, romantically or as friends, people start loving what you do, not who you are, right? Because
Hmm.
they like they like that you're making them happy, they like that, but that's not necessarily what you want and who you are and what your values are and what you like doing. And so in a way they sort of might fall in love or become friends with like not the real you, right? And so over time that can really have, obviously it's an impact on them because they don't really know the real you, but it has a real impact on you because we then start like resenting, right? Our friend, our partner, our spouse, because if we feel that they're not reading our mind, or right, or they're not sort of magically prioritizing what we want, even though they don't really know what we want because we've never really shared that with them. And so it
Yeah.
can lead to a lot of frustration and a lot of sense of like that of even in you're in a relationship that you're lonely because you're
Yeah.
actually not in a relationship with them, you're in a relationship with making them happy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because obviously being lonely really comes down to not being able to connect with people on like a real internal level, right? So
Right.
if you have like 200 people around you, you could still be like lonely if you don't connect with people on that intrinsic level, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, one thing you mentioned is that, people pleasers, like, they don't really know how to tell people what they truly want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if you've been people pleasing for a long time, do people pleasers actually know what they really want on a fundamental level, or are they a bit confused on that level as
That's
well?
such a good question, Shaq. And really again, the research would show that in some ways, I think that we start confusing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly right, because we put so much energy into trying to read your mind and trying to figure out and make you happy. I don't even give myself time and space to take the pause to sort of do the internal reflection of like, what do I even really want to
Yeah.
do? Right. And you're exactly right. Then we become sort of confused in thinking that what I want is that positive reinforcement of like making you happy. Yes, I like that. I like that. But is that, that doesn't mean that's the behavior that I want. That's the action I want to do. And so you're right. I think so many times we sort of get wrapped up in this, it's a reinforcing cycle of like, I'm making you happy. I want the positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
But I don't want to keep doing the thing. So I don't even know, right? You're exactly right. Like I'm then out
Yeah.
of touch with what is it that I even want because I'm so wrapped up in that external you, the other.
Yeah. Yeah, got it. Okay, yeah. So when it comes down to, like romantic relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we always talk about like, oh, we have to be able to really tell people what we want on that front. Now, like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that really mean though? Like, if someone is a people pleaser, like what should they be trying to figure out about themselves in order to really connect with people on that level and not feel like, oh man, like I'm not able to really connect with people. I can't express
Right.
myself. Like, what are the various parts about themselves that they need to be honest with and really figure out and then be able to communicate because like you can't really tell people what you want again if
Right.
you don't know, right? So like what should you start
Exactly.
with? Yeah.
I know. I think so much of it starts with just sort of getting in touch at a fundamental level, and what we talk about in sort of my book that we just wrote on Ditch the Ditty and all of the stuff is what we
Yeah.
call essentials, which is really like
Mm.
what are those things that are core to us that gets into our values? Like what is it at the end of the day? What are the values that I really, what are the characteristics, what are the experiences that I actually like? Turns out I don't really like going hiking with you every weekend because, because
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really like bugs or whatever it is, right? So but I think it all starts, Shaq, at a very core level of sort of getting in touch with our personal values. Like what is it at the end of the day of sort of like the characteristics of that are important to me, the values that are important to me, and then that starts translating into getting clarity around what are the kinds of activities that I actually like doing, right? Who are the kinds of people that I actually like being with, right? What are the kinds of experiences that I want to have? It gets into our career, even, right? So as we
Yeah.
think about what are the things that actually fulfill me, and like back to you were saying that intrinsically, it's not that I'm looking for external rewards or validation, but intrinsically, if like nobody else even knew that I was doing this, I would still enjoy doing it. And
Yeah.
so I've seen that even in myself of like, agreeing to go to a restaurant of something that like I just can't, I do not like it or
You don't want to
something,
go.
right? I
Yeah.
don't want to go because I
Yeah.
went, and it's like at the end it's like I don't, or again, or agreeing to be like, I don't really want to go for a 5 mile hike because to me that's like misery. I'd like rather curl up and read a book for the day or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
again, so much of that starts with what are our core values, and then that starts translating into getting to know what are the actual experiences and things that make me happy, even if nobody knew that I was doing them.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so it seems like the main things here, like it really comes down to your values. What
Yep.
do you want to experience? Like, like on that level, like like what kind of experiences do you want? And then finally, what are you actually interested in?
Yeah.
Right. So again, if you are raised to be a people pleaser, you are probably really suppressed and controlled as a kid, right? So you are made to feel like your interests are not worthy. And as we just spoke about, when that happens, you're not going to be able to choose a profession that you actually want to be a part of. And, your profession is a huge part of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just quickly talk about how people pleasing ruins someone's ability to build a meaningful, like profession and just like a career in general.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to exactly sometimes if we are so steeped in people pleasing, especially if we get stuck in really, like you said, if there are really like over influential parents and stuff, I can totally end up in a field or a job. And I've seen that. I'm a professor. I see that with my students sometimes, right? Their
Yeah.
parents want them to do this and they want to do that. And so that can be really hard. But even taking a step back from sort of really sort of extreme cases of that, a lot of us, right, sort of have this sense of people pleasing at some level because we've, again, gotten reinforced for it at some level. And in our careers, that can show up in lots of different ways. So oftentimes you become what I say is like the Swiss Army knife of the office. You're
Yeah.
very useful, but you're exhausted because you're doing all of these things. You sort of shape shift into whatever version of yourself that your boss or your colleagues need, which means that sometimes then your actual talents and real skills and your desires of what it is, the projects or the things that you like to be working on sort of get left in the break room because you're so busy sort of being the office sort of Swiss Army knife or chameleon and doing all of the things. So in some ways you become reliable, but not necessarily remarkable because you're doing the
Hmm.
things that like make other people happy. You're like you're like the glue that might hold, things together, but you're not stepping in and necessarily stepping forward with the things that really spark you and light you up because you're so busy managing other people's perceptions that you don't really own your own brilliance. And so sometimes that can leave you sort of stuck in your career trajectory where you're like, yeah, people like
Hmm.
you and they want
Yeah.
to work with you, but you're not getting promoted and sort of seen for the unique person and talents and skills that you bring to the office or the organization because you're so busy blending and doing everything for everybody else, that you're kind of a chameleon. And so what is your true color and how can
Yeah.
you use that?
Exactly. Yeah. So you mentioned that you're a professor, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, with kids nowadays, especially like in my generation, like I had someone else on who spoke about how Gen Z tends to be a bit more controlled by their parents,
Mm-hmm.
more like because of fear, right? Because we're
Mm.
kind of raised in like a society where fear has been really heightened.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a person, or like your student comes to you and they don't know what they want to do because like every time they had a slight interest in something that's been suppressed, right? And to really know what you want, you have to actually go and try things. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only way that you'll know
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do, right? So how would you help a person who's maybe 18, 19, 20, who's in that boat and they just don't know what to do? Because that age is like really crucial,
Right.
right? I mean, obviously it's really young, but it's still crucial though, because like the
Mm-hmm.
choices you make during that age will really really dictate how life goes as time goes on. So how can someone find a career that makes them happy if they've been suppressed for so long and just don't know where to start?
Yeah, great question, Shaq. And you're so right. That's part of why I wanted to be a professor because I think that time frame in our life is so
It is.
precious,
It
and it
is.
is such a moment of discovery. And that's really my advice where I go is this word of discovery that I encourage my students. I have two teenagers myself. It's
Mm,
really for me, part of that again, getting to know yourself and your values is an act of discovery. So I really encourage and coach my students and my advisees or anybody that comes through my door of like, what are even small ways that you can start sort of experimenting or cultivating experiences for you to try things on. Exactly. Because it's not about, putting all of your eggs in one basket and then 4 years later in college figuring out that's not what you want.
yeah.
But that's what, like how, like in college, for example, how can you use your elective classes? How can we look at your internships? How can we look at your sort of things outside of the classroom that you can start having like little experiences and trying things on and being like, you know what, I'm really sort of curious. Like I've had business students who are like, you know what, I'm really sort of curious about psychology. And but it's like they don't want to change their major and become a psychology
Yeah.
major. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, what's the smallest sort of thing we can start doing to have you explore if you even like that? Right. And so,
Hmm.
like, if that's taking a class or even visiting class, or sometimes it's interviewing or talking to somebody in that field. So you just start giving yourself literally like little experiences and you can sort of be like, yeah, and then doing and taking the pause to really be like, did I like that? Do I like that? Can I imagine myself doing these things before you're, 4 years and, how many dollars in debt into something that is not what you really like doing? And so
Yeah.
there's lots of ways, and we can do that, whether that's in college and, or as teenagers, but even sort of on the other side of that, like how can I start to just continue to like, it's not about, all of a sudden, I use the metaphor of slide, like, I'm not going to throw away all my clothes and like get a completely new wardrobe, but I can get a new shirt and sort of try it on and sort of see
Yeah.
like, does this fit? Do I like that? Yeah, actually, okay, now I can start making more space in my closet for more things that look like that, you know?
Hmm. Got it. Yeah. So it seems like it really comes down to like taking like just little small steps, right? And kind of, like testing the water. Like as you mentioned, just take small classes, talk to people in those professions, and then really ask yourself, okay, do I want that? But again, it really comes down to understanding what you want,
Right.
right? And finding those values and interests and so on. Now,
And listening to yourself, right? You have to
yeah, you
listen to
have to listen.
that inner voice and be like, did I
Yes.
like that? Did I not like that? That is, we have to give ourselves time to do that reflection.
Yeah, again, yeah, because like most people who say like they don't know what they want, like to be honest, on a deep level, they really do know. It's just that
Right.
voice has been drowned out so badly
Exactly.
by
Right.
like society.
It's so true. It's
Yeah.
there, right? It's like it's exactly. It's like reconnecting with that inner self. It's there. She's there.
Yeah,
He's there. They're there.
exactly, exactly. Now, you also mentioned that, for some reason, like with the kids that you work with, if they're in business, right? They might be interested in psychology, but they don't want to make that shift. Is there a certain reason for that, or is it just because like they still don't know if they want to go into
Part of it is
psychology?
just sort of like if they don't know, right? So if it's sort of like, I think I'm interested in
I
this, right?
think.
So
Okay.
part of it, and exactly. And I've had students exactly that, they're like, they find something and they fall in love and they're like, yes, I want to change my major, or I want to have a double major, or I like, how can I combine these things together? So definitely I've seen people do really great shifts, but it's sort of that, it's the sort of not, jumping from, what do we say, like from the frying pan into the fryer. So you're just jumping to try to find things, so you're really giving yourself the space so you can intentionally be like, no, I want a business degree with a psychology minor, right? Because this is what I like. Or, or I have students on the flip side, I have psychology students who are like, all of a sudden they're like, I actually really like finance or something. They're like,
Yeah.
I never knew that I
Yeah.
liked, or something. And so it can go, it goes in all different directions. But yeah, it's the sort of moving with intentionality. So that's not just like, oh, kind of a whim, like, I think I want to change my entire direction. It's like,
Yeah.
let's sort of explore and make sure that you really are in touch with that inner voice and the direction. And let's talk about, what is success going to look to you? What kind of lifestyle do you want? What kind of career do you want? What kind of, where do you want to live, and all of these different things? And
Yeah.
how can you start building a career and a life toward that?
Exactly. Yeah. So like it seems like the most important thing is to really take some time, with yourself and just constantly ask yourself those deeper questions to figure out what you want. And then that'll make you
Yeah.
much more effective in the world because now you know what you want, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
being in this place where you just are confused and then you're kind of like all over the
Right.
place. Yeah. So, obviously, like as you probably know, if you don't know or are not able to build meaningful relationships and find meaningful work, it's going to ruin your mental health,
Mm.
right? So can we talk about like the various aspects of one's mental health and how that can get ruined as time goes on if people stay in that people pleaser mindset too long?
Yeah, people pleasing, I would say, is sort of like a gateway drug to burnout, right?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
this, because we really lose track, as we said, of what you want, and that can really erode your sense of self, which we know is so core to our mental well-being. And so I say, like, people pleasing is also, it's like we're always like, it's this emotional, credit card debt that we keep sort of racking up, right? We keep
Yeah.
spending energy on other people, and even energy that we don't have, right? Mental energy. We can talk in lots of different ways. Like, we have so much energy, time, mental, emotional energy. And, it becomes this like continual sort of siphon or drain, because we're constantly putting our energy out to others with the hope, right, that it's going to come back to us, But really, we start then confusing sort of being agreeable and again, pleasing other people with being worthy. So that mental sort of, again, what's so important is that sense of self-efficacy and self-worth that is such at the core of our mental health starts to erode, because then we start to resent other people,
Mhm.
because we are again, putting all of our energy out that we don't have any energy back for ourselves.
Yeah.
So it really can just lead to burnout, depression, anxiety. We're then sort of, overly anxious about, always trying to be on the lookout for how we can make other people, or like any little piece of negative feedback can really then have a hard impact on our mental well-being, because all of a sudden, if it's like, if they don't like me, then I'm not worthy as a person, right? Because we're
Hmm.
so into external validation instead of that internal self-worth.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, obviously there's like, multiple different aspects to that, right? Like you will burn out because you're wasting energy on things that you don't want to be involved in. You'll have anxiety and you're going to build this like anger and resentment, especially towards people that caused, you to be in this place where you're constantly people pleasing, right?
Right.
And that pretty much leads into the next point where you talk about like invisible invoices,
Right.
right? So like, where does that concept come from? And like, again, like, why is it important for people to understand that if they want to take care of their mental health in the long run?
Yeah, I love this metaphor of invisible invoices. For me, they're the mental and emotional receipts that we keep after doing something that we didn't really want to do, right? So
Yeah.
it's sort of, we're expecting a gold star or a thank you in return. And so again, it's those things that we keep when we really didn't want to do them. And so the
Yeah.
kicker, though, is why they're receipts is like the other person never actually asked for that favor, right? So they don't actually owe you anything, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're doing that. And so invisible invoices sort of keep us trapped in this cycle of overgiving and disappointment, because we're waiting to be validated for things sometimes that nobody even asked us to do, right? We're just, so it's this invoice that we sort of we're keeping track of all of these things, and sort of waiting for payment,
Yeah.
mental,
Yeah.
emotional sort of payments back. And actually, sometimes we're running around trying to make everybody happy, and they weren't even asking us to do those things, right? And so
Yeah.
that again leads
Hmm.
back to that. Again, we're looking to be validated for services nobody even asked for sometimes.
God. Yeah. So again, that pretty much comes down to just being kind and polite, but again, with the intention of getting some sort of validation rather than just being kind and polite for just
Yeah.
the actual act of being kind and polite. Right.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
exactly.
Great. Now, one thing that I find really interesting about your blog post was that
Yeah.
you wrote that one of the main questions that people have in their mind when they're people pleasing is what will they think, right? Because again,
Hmm.
they want that validation from someone else or something else. Now, you mentioned you should change that question to something else, right? So, what exactly is that question, and why do you think that change in paradigm will really help a person overcome that people pleasing trap?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Great question. For me, that question when I'm in people pleasing mode is what will they think? Exactly. It's that focus on the other. And that question really makes everybody else the CEO of your life, right? What will
Yeah.
they think? Puts everybody else in the driver's seat of your life. When I shift to the question of what do I want? Again, it's maybe not a question we often pause and think.
Yeah.
It shifts though, and it can feel selfish to a people pleaser to sort of shift into the like, what do I want? But it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you visible. First, it makes you visible to yourself. Right? It starts making you visible to other people. It invites you to not turn somebody else into the CEO of your life, but invites you to participate the bus driver, as the CEO
Yeah.
of your life, right? That you're
Yeah.
the head of your life. You are in it and participating instead of just performing. You're not performing for other people, but you're actually participating. And so for me, when you shift that question from what will they think to what do I want, you
Mhm.
start living your life instead of just managing other people's reactions.
God, yeah. So again, like when you shift that paradigm, it just comes down to figuring out, okay, like I have to validate myself to build confidence and be happy, right? Again, rather
Right.
than focusing on someone else's opinion of you. Now, one problem with this is that sometimes if you've been people pleasing too long, you can like swing to the other side of the pendulum and just go
Mm-hmm.
to an extreme,
Right.
right? Because like you may have gotten just like completely sick of it, and then you just want to make a change immediately, which oftentimes doesn't really happen. It takes time for this to happen, right? So
Right.
how do you know that you're not swinging to like the complete other side of the spectrum and entering the extreme where you're just like overly selfish,
Right.
rude for no reason, and you just don't care at all about anyone, right?
I love that, right? Like
Yeah,
it's like we're so tired of the people pleasing cape. We
yeah,
tear it off and like
yeah,
we become like, like the Incredible Hulk
yeah.
underneath
Complete
it or so,
opposite. Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so I think you're exactly right. It's a great question because honestly, I think that we have that fear exactly that if we stop for one moment of people pleasing, that somehow I'm going to turn into a selfish monster, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that fear in part is what keeps us stuck
Hmm.
in the people pleasing. But the truth is that most recovering people pleasers, you couldn't even be selfish if you tried, right?
Really?
It's like,
Mm.
I mean, sometimes it's so hard, right? That it's not your reflex. It's not that like your reflex is to be mean. But you can check yourself. One of the ways I think is we start to again experiment and sort of start asking the different question, what do I want? If that feels like too much of a selfish question for you to even experiment with, maybe a question you can start with is, what do I want that also honors the situation and relationship? Right. So you can sort of
Okay.
still balance like you're on, what do I
Mm.
want? You're asking that also honors the situation or relationship. So you're not turning into the incredible
Yeah.
selfish Hulk.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's not about swinging, but it's about centering, right? So you're bringing yourself back into the equation. You can still consider, of course, the relationship, the situation. You're dealing with coworkers, your spouse, your children, your friends. So how can you, what do I want that's also going to honor this relationship? And so that can help be a gateway to start recognizing you can swing without turning into the selfish hawk.
God, yeah. So the second part of that question like really helps the person still feel like, okay, I'm still being, kind and polite by taking the other
Yeah.
person's feelings into consideration, right? Now, one of the main kiss of death when it comes down to people pleasers
Right.
is that they feel like they're hurting people if someone
I
does get disappointed in them, right? Because that's just gonna happen. I mean, no matter what you do in life, even if you're like the best person, you are gonna find yourself in a place where people are just not happy with you, right? So
Right.
how do you really work yourself out of that mindset of knowing that you're not hurting people if they are disappointed in what you've done or what you're doing? Like, how do you know that you're not hurting people? Because that's the number one thing that
I
stops
know.
people
Right.
from changing. Yeah.
It is true. And again, I wish I had a magic wand for all of us, including myself,
Yeah.
to make that feeling go away. And the truth is, again, looking at the research, looking at practical experience in this, the 3 steps that I have found and that I think are true is step one, feel the cringe. It's real, right?
Okay.
You gotta like,
Got
it's
it.
true. Like it is going to feel awkward. I'm just not going to magically like I disappoint somebody and it's like, oh, that feels like rainbows and unicorns. Like it's not going to
No.
feel, but so to feel like that feeling of is real and that's okay. And
Mm.
step two, realize that disappointment is not necessarily cruelty. It's clarity, as we said sometimes, right? You're being clear you can't own their reaction, right? We can't control and own their reaction, but I can own my clarity of what I want and what I don't want.
Hmm.
And step 3 in part is to remember the wild truth that disappointing others is inevitable. It's
Yeah.
inevitable. Of course we're going to disappoint others, but abandoning yourself is optional. So I can, and I wrote about this, yes, in my blog and stuff, that I was joking after going to the Grand Canyon that,
Yeah.
I was like, if you look up on Yelp, like the Grand Canyon gets 1-star reviews because people are
Really,
like,
eh?
it's
Yeah.
dirty and it's a big hole in the ground. And I'm like, goodness me. I'm like, if the Grand Canyon can't make everybody happy, this wonder of the world, right? There's no way I'm going to be able to make, like, it is inevitable. If we are living our life, we are going to at times disappoint people.
Yeah.
And so how can we, you know, how though are we navigating? Am I navigating my life with that disappointment and trying to prevent disappointment? Or am I navigating my life with like staying true to what is important and what are my values and what matters most to me? And sometimes that might be disappointing somebody, but I'm doing that with clarity, and I can still do that with kindness. I can be like, sorry, I can't do that. All
Yeah.
of the things. You don't have to be a selfish monster about things, as we said. But disappointment, when you can disappoint someone, you can still be a kind, loving human. Like, welcome to the club. Like, we're all disappointing somebody somewhere sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Got it. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. So the main 3 points is like feel the cringe, right?
Yeah.
Just to get really comfortable with that feeling, because like you are gonna go through it, right? So like, you're gonna have to just know what that feels like, and then understand that you're not being cruel. You're being clear about what you want, and you're
Yeah.
building that sense of self. Rather than really building that sense of self on other people, it's more on what you want and who you are.
Right.
And then number 3, you mentioned, again, people will have a problem with you no matter what you do, no
Right.
matter what. And that can be kind of hard to really accept sometimes because you're like, why? I'm a good person. I'm kind. Like,
Right.
why would they have a problem
Everybody's
with me?
gonna
Yeah.
love me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Guess
as you,
what,
yeah.
Jack? There's
No.
somebody out there that doesn't love us. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And then especially in the world of social media, like that makes it even
Right.
harder
Oh, it's so
because it's
hard.
like like people leave random comments, with like random accounts. And then like in your mind, again, if you are in that phase of people pleasing, you're going to be like, man, like what did I do to this person?
Right.
Why are they saying this? But again, one thing to really understand is, again, it's most times it's about them, not about you. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not happy with themselves. So they're just like, projecting that onto you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, one thing that, people pleasers really need to learn how to do is set boundaries in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the main first steps, right? To really, again, stop, worrying about building confidence on external validation and more focusing on what you want.
Right.
But setting boundaries is something, again, no one really teaches us how to do that, right? Like there's not, I mean, I'm not sure about now, but like, in general, there's no classes on it in school. Like no one really
Right.
shows you how to do
Right.
that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So how would you help a person who is trying to learn how to set boundaries to really break away from that phase of people pleasing?
Yeah, again, I go back to as we were talking about earlier and sort of like experiments. I mean, a big piece of it is like starting small, right? Like starting small, because part of it is getting used, as you said, getting used to doing something that might feel uncomfortable for us. So boundaries don't have to be big and dramatic or spicy, right? But they can sound as simple as like, that doesn't work for me. Or, you know what? Sometimes the boundary isn't even a yes or no. It can be like, let me get back to you, right? So let me get back
Mm-hmm.
to you. And so even that boundary of like giving yourself time and space to make a decision about something. And so the goal, again, I think the thinking with boundaries is, the goal isn't to control others, because actually I can't control your reaction. You're going to be disappointed or not. I can't control that. Again,
Mm-hmm.
it's about being clear about what's okay and not okay for you. And so again, I always say, like with boundaries, and I love this, people have talked about this, right? We're always teaching or training people how to interact with us, right? Because
Yeah,
we're giving them
that's right.
feedback, right? So
Yeah.
I'm either, I'm giving you feedback all the time about that. And so I even joke about, like if you don't want people emailing you at 10 o'clock at night, maybe don't reply to the email at 10 o'clock at night, right? So right, because we're sending messages all the time with what we're doing and what we're doing. And so if I want other people to start interacting with me differently, I have to start sort of giving voice to that. And so even if you're again, it can feel nervous. I said that, feel the cringe, like it can feel, that even if it feels sort of a little discomforting, you're probably doing it right if you're, again, listening to yourself and being honest with what you want. Again, it goes back to that clarity. Like, how can you, even I said, a boundary doesn't have to be, it can be even a boundary of giving yourself more time to reflect on something. So, and again, that starting small is so important. So say you can start practicing saying no to things you don't care about before you try to
Uh,
say no to things maybe you do care about.
Got it. Okay, so it seems like it just comes down to like, start small, right? And say no to
Mm-hmm.
things that may not really have much of a significance. But again, as you start stacking up those small wins, you'll find yourself in a place where it becomes easier to say no to bigger things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go like a step deeper, right? Like how would you really approach that concept of setting boundaries with, let's say, friends and like your significant other, because I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the or places that people really struggle with, right? Even if let's say you're not a people pleaser, it's just not
Mm-hmm.
something that people are
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with. So
Mm-hmm.
how would you really get better at setting boundaries in that domain?
Yeah. Great question. And again, it's like I wish it was so easy to do to
Yeah,
do all of this.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that in those domains it can definitely be the hardest, because sometimes those are the relationships we've spent the most time, building up our people pleasing. We're so, we're with those people a lot. We are all of that. And so
Yeah.
again, I go back to the like starting small. Sometimes it's like starting micro small, especially in
Mm,
those relationships. Sometimes I found, and for myself and others, sometimes even just the giving voice of like, I'm going to be working on this. I'm going to be working on that. In terms of letting people know that, again, these are ideally people that care about you as well. And so instead of seeing them as sort of the enemy of somebody I'm making a boundary against, how can I actually involve them in maybe sort of my journey of self growth? Right. So
yeah.
how can you actually, instead of sort of pushing them away, sort of bring them in terms of letting them know, like, look, I'm working on my people. I'm working on, maybe you don't call it people pleasing, right? But I'm working on
Mm.
XYZ. I'm working on taking more time for me. I'm working on, being more clear with you about what I actually want. And so sometimes giving voice to that can be helpful, because actually then those are the people that care about us the most and can actually be on the journey with us. So sometimes that's really helpful.
Got it. Okay, so it seems like what you're really saying is just focus on like the small wins. Again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just really focus on stacking up the small wins and build more of your confidence on being honest rather than just being polite, right? Because
Yeah.
once you switch that perspective as well, again, you'll get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you'll be able to handle the bigger problems as time goes on,
Right.
right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's, um, unfortunately or fortunately, sometimes it's healthy that like some relationships will also take their course, right? As you start
Yeah,
becoming clear, there are maybe
yeah.
some friendships that aren't the healthiest for you or aren't the best for you because they don't respect your boundaries, or because they really just want you to make them happy and they don't care about what makes you happy. Well, then that's something important to learn as well, because maybe that's not a healthy relationship for you to be in the first
Mm-hmm.
place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So again, that comes down to like being okay with broken friendships and like broken relationships, because like again, you can't really control that person's reaction, right? Like as long as you're
Right.
doing your best to be kind and polite while also being honest, that's all you can really do, right? And then how they react is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much on them.
Right.
And, like it's probably healthy for you too, as you mentioned, like that relationship or friendship is just probably not meant for you. And it's a good thing
Right.
now you can move on.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. If they don't want to help you be a happier person,
It is what it
and a
is. Yeah.
healthier person, maybe they're not the best friend for you.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. Now, as you probably know, when it really comes down to breaking out of this, people pleasing trap, it's going to take time because like most likely you've been in this mindset from the time that you were a kid, right? So to make that change, it's going to take a lot of rewiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for a person to really overcome it, they're going to need consistent help as time goes on,
Right.
right? So if a person is looking for, like a healthy source of support to help them as they go on their journey, what are the various sources of support that you would tell them to go and check out to really help them on this journey of finally, breaking free from being a people pleaser?
Yeah, and there's so many different levels of this. I mean, first and foremost, I will be the first advocate of like, there are times and places for like we need therapy in our life, right? Like, is it sometimes, do you need to get in touch with some of those earlier, and unpack that, as we said, the social conditioning that we have just absorbed. And so therapy can be a really great tool for, unpacking those messages and like, understanding how we have interpreted our self-worth through other people's eyes. And so therapy and or coaching, I myself have done both. I've worked with therapists. I've worked with, coaches, even in a different capacity, just to sort of hold up a mirror for you, and help you sort of see yourself and your, sometimes it's about having somebody help you interrupt what has become just my habitual response is to make you happy and put you first. And
Mm-hmm.
I had one of my coaches, it was the greatest thing. She was like, yes, it's great, you want to make other people happy. Do you get to be on the list of happy too, right? Like, on the list of like
Yeah.
making other people happy. Where and when do you get to be on your list of what if you turned your people pleasing toward you and said Lindsay gets to be happy too, right? So just sometimes having people that will hold
Yeah.
up that mirror for you. Sometimes we have those in our friendships, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you really have, again, those trusted relationships and friendships that can really sort of be, I call them our real talk friends, right? That will, like, when you're like, I'm fine, like they won't let the like I'm
Yeah.
fine just slide, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely, so that the relations, whether that's professional relationships and stuff. And of course, I think there's lots of things. Your podcast is a great example, like books, like the book that my colleagues and I just wrote, called Ditch the Ditty, Doing What Matters Instead of Doing It All. We go into sort of unpacking this and lift up stories and examples and tools and things that you can do. But honestly, I think so there's not a one size fits all of getting support, of course, like especially we're talking about mental health. And so, but oftentimes it's like, again, what are the different things that, do you need to take? Some people like to academically understand, right? Things. Some people are like, just give me the tools I can practice. And so I think it's, again, about knowing yourself, but I'm all about, how can you surround yourself with people and tools and
Mm-hmm.
resources to help you practice. And again, hold up that mirror and sort of be like, I don't want to just keep doing the same thing anymore because I am burned out and I'm not, it's just not sustainable for me. Right. So how do I start? What are even those small steps I can start doing?
Got it. Okay, so it seems like it really comes down to, having those people and just tools that you can really go to make sure that, hey, I am on the right track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would you say to someone that says, yeah, but you're still, like relying on some validation from a source that's not within you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like, sometimes people might say that, hey, like if I want to really break out of people pleasing, I shouldn't be relying on tools or people in the first place. But
Right.
right?
It's
Yeah.
I love that, right? the paradox of that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's interesting, right? Because the people pleasing, I think that's a great sort of clarification, because people pleasing doesn't mean like breaking of the people pleasing doesn't mean I don't have people in my life, right? It means I'm changing the relationship with those people. And so you're right. Like if therapy starts becoming like I'm trying to make my therapist happy, right? That is probably not a healthy thing. Exactly. And then there's a whole, unpacking that. But I think you're right. It's not about becoming breaking up with your people pleasing doesn't mean that you have to be like you're living in a cave for the rest of your life by yourself and making yourself happy. That's not it. It's the
you'll
recognition.
Be miserable.
You'll be miserable then too, right? We are relational creatures. It's the like, how can I be in relationship? I have to be in relationship with myself first. I have to have a healthy relationship with me and understand what I want and what I need before I can have a healthy relationship with anybody else. And so, but that's the whole idea, is like, we want to be in then healthy relationships with other people. So, so I think that is it. Yeah. It's the, having those conversations where I'm not worried about, again, pleasing my friend, pleasing my therapist, pleasing my coach. It's about, understanding me better.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So it seems like, going towards these tools of like podcasts, books, therapy, or friends in general, it's more about like just getting help rather than trying to please someone, which is the main difference here, right? Which is like, if you're just, like, for example, if you go to your therapist and you start lying about, how you actually feel, then you're people pleasing. That's exactly the difference,
right? Like, and I'll admit, like the first time I started coaching and stuff, I'm like, I really want my coach to like me. And I'm like, this isn't going to help me. Right. And so you're exactly right, Shaq, that it goes back to that intentionality. And, if we are not using it for our own, again, intrinsic, things, then we can definitely fall into the trap of our helpers can become part of our pattern, for sure.
Yeah, great. And then it's also like really important that they ask you, hey, are you actually being honest, or are you just trying to tell me something that will make me feel happy or good, right? So once again, it really comes down to building that confidence and belief, being honest rather than just overly polite for no reason,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Godwin, this was a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for what you do. I know this episode will help a lot of people as time goes on. Cause again, as we spoke about, especially in the era of social media, people tend to just do things, specifically for the validation of other people, which will ruin their life as time goes on if they're not careful. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So if people want to really look into your work, figure out more about this stuff, where would you tell them to go?
Yeah, I would say, please follow and check out my new book. It's called Ditch the Ditty, Doing What Matters Instead of Doing It All. And it really dives into a lot more of this with the people pleasing and the social messages that we internalize, and what are the tools and the practices that we can do to really get in touch again with what matters to us so we can show up more fully in the world. So that's a great place. So it's ditchtheditty.com, DITCHDITTY, ditchtheditty.com. And then the other place that I often have a lot of things is I blog for Psychology Today. So I'd love people to follow me there. My blog's called Possibilitizing, and it's all about sort of looking at, especially from bringing to life positive psychology and different psychological theories and tools into practical ways that we can just show up better in this world that is hard enough for all of us to get through day to day. So always just looking for how can we face the world a little better and make the world a little better place.
Yes, I will link all of that in the video, and they can all go check it out if need be.
Great.
All right.
Thanks for having me, Shaq. I appreciate it.
No problem, Dr. Godwin. This was great. Hey, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.